So we're using effort, but the effort is with a purpose. There's an intelligence to it. There's like we have an intention and we have the understanding of this is when I make a mistake, can I in real time change my behavior or my whatever it needs to be changed so that I'm getting the result I want. But unless I have this, if I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, I'm so busy reacting, there's no space between stimulus and response. Yeah. And when I'm in the rest and digest, there's space, and in that space, I get the freedom and power to choose. So we have.
Welcome to the Elev8 podcast. I'm your host and coach, Tyler Johnson. Thank you for tuning in. If you are a return listener, I'd be grateful for your rating or review. And if you dig this episode, give us a like or share. And now, whether you've tuned in to elevate your mindset, your game, or just your day, you are in the right place. My guest this episode is a mindfulness and performance expert. He has worked with NBA teams and coaches for many years, most notably Coach Phil Jackson with the Bulls and Michael Jordan and the Lakers with the late Kobe Bryant. Kobe had this to say about our guest. He said, "He helped me understand the art of mindfulness, to be neither distracted or focused, rigid or flexible, passive or aggressive. I learned just to be." He is also the author of The Mindful Athlete. You can enroll in his online course, The Mindful Athlete, as well at his website, georgemumford.com. You can find his book linked up here as well. Welcome to the Elev8 podcast, the legend, Mr. George Mumford. How are you doing today, George?
I am amazing. How are you?
I am amazing. I'm excited to have you on the podcast. I've been wanting to have you on for a long time to share some of your wisdom and your story. So pumped to have you on today.
Yeah, I'm pumped to be here.
Good. Well, I myself have, had the pleasure of reading The Mindful Athlete, your book. It's linked up here to the podcast for those that are listening. But those who may not have had the chance yet or may not know some of your story and your journey, could you briefly tell us a little bit of, your background in basketball and your life and how it kind of brought you into mindfulness eventually in your journey?
Yeah, so being an OG, I have to simplify because I've been around for a minute. So I played basketball, competitive basketball through high school, and I went to college, and I would have been a walk-on when I got injured, and that changed everything. But I had, I pretty much got addicted to pain meds because I was always injury prone because of the stress and everything. Mm-hmm. Then I got, then I had ended up having an issue with illegal drugs and alcohol. And then I was functional, so I continued to work, to do work and stuff. But at some point, it controlled me, and I went into recovery with to treatment center for 21 days. And then when I came out, I realized I still had the chronic pain, and I had to learn how to manage the pain without using drugs or illegal drugs, but also prescribed drugs. I wanted to minimize that or not get addicted to drugs because I had chronic pain. So I went into this HMO. I was part of this HMO, and they had this program called stress management. And so I learned about the mind-body process and about meditation and yoga and basically the mind-body modalities like Tai Chi, meditation. And also what was fascinating is for me to take responsibility and learn about my mind and body, learn about everything. So in other words, my lifestyle change included me being more actively involved in the treatment of my chronic pain as well as my ongoing development. Yeah. So I adopted this model that basically said that you can be at the neutral point where there's nothing wrong and you don't have to do anything, or you can understand that that's just the beginning, that the idea is to move towards more levels of wellness, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, so that I was doing these things that were consistent with, like I have a checking account, and if I write checks without making deposits, it's going to bounce. So the idea is to continue to make deposits to the wellness. So the idea is to get as much wellness as I can And so to not only get out of the neutral zone and not get into the zone where you have, disability, you have illness, disability, and death, moving in the opposite direction, moving towards life, moving towards more levels of wellness, where I'm actually continuing to expand my capacity, my potentials, get in touch with my potentials. But the idea is to keep moving towards higher and higher levels of wellness, so that when stress does happen or when things do happen, I can write a check and it won't bounce.
Yeah, it's there for you.
It's there for me. So that's how I got into it. And it's because because I had the need, and it wasn't just that I needed it, I wanted it. And so, and then it went from just helping me deal with my chronic pain and my substance abuse to thriving and really pursuing excellence and wisdom, and wanting to share it with other people.
So it led you to an amazing journey of sharing that and impacting so many others through mindfulness. You've had the opportunity to work with some of the legends in basketball. Michael Jordan and Kobe, we'll throw those two out. Is there a lesson in your time, maybe if not those two others, that you learned in working with some of the great athletes in this mindfulness space, something that you learned from them?
Yes. Well, we start off with, sometimes it's interesting because I met this priest. His name was Matthew Fox, and he really got into trouble with the Dominicans. He was a Dominican priest because he wrote a book called The Original Blessing. Mm-hmm. And what I have learned is especially through myself, that I have a masterpiece, a divine spark, Christ consciousness, Buddha nature, Kuan Yin, and whatever you want to call it, that we have these unlimited potentials inside of us that can be developed, and that only they can be developed by us. As an inside job, as the inner game. And to the degree that you develop those unlimited potentials we have, or the latent abilities, if you will, that will be reflected in our performance in our life. That the more we develop, the higher, the more elite our performance would be. So working with someone like Kobe or Michael, or anyone, it could be a elementary school athlete or elementary school person, 9 or 10 that I'm working with. And it's all about how you are reacting and responding to life, and the idea about understanding that we have this ability, we're wired for success. It's just a matter of whether or not we develop it. And that's an inside job. That's, mindfulness and psychology, philosophy, whatever, getting teaching and direction and guidance from others. You don't have to do it yourself. That we have this ability to take a roadblock and make it into a stepping stone. And that's what I did with my recovery. So that's the lesson to learn, is that those guys had struggles, but like I like to say, is no struggle, no swag. So people come in with swag without having earned it. But real swag is from being able to overcome, to embrace your success. I mean, your successes as well as your mistakes, and the challenges or difficulties that we encounter actually become stepping stones to get into a higher level of living more creatively and fully, a higher level of performance, where you're embracing it and you're saying yes to it, and you're failing up.
Yeah, I always like to tell athletes, the struggle creates your strength. I like the struggle creates your swag. I like that.
No struggle, no swag.
I like that.
I got swag. I earned that.
I like it. I love it. One of the things you talk about in the book, and I don't want you spoil it too much for people that want to go out and read it, but maybe if you could just touch on, I think the 5 superpowers that you get into more detail in the book, but can you just kind of talk about each of those 5 briefly? Yeah.
So the 5 superpowers, sometimes I refer to it as like having a wheel, and you have a hub, and then you have the spokes. And mindfulness, which is this ability to see clearly, like mirror mind. It just reflects what's in front of it. No distortions, no interpretations, just the raw data. That we have to get to a place where we have this ability to step back and observe our experience. It's awareness, certain kind of awareness that is uncritical. Just observe what's there, and then from that awareness, we're able to use insight or intelligence or information. Sometimes I call it as a direct experience or intuition, that we have these things. So mindfulness helps us cultivate what I call the 5 superpowers, which I think about as having your own power plant or access to power. And so they are mindfulness is the first one. I talk about mindfulness, but I can also talk about concentration, insight or wisdom, effort, and trust. And so there's the 5 superpowers, and they interact with each other. So mindfulness helps us cultivate it. So in order for me to be able to be present, to be able to listen to you and have a conversation with you, those 5 superpowers are interacting. So the first thing is I have to have the mindfulness, which is presence of mind, being in the moment, but also the concentration of like the one thing, be here now, focusing on what we need to do. But I need to have the information, what are the principles involved in listening or having a conversation. So I have to know what the essentials are. And so for mindfulness, for me to be mindful, the essentials are to be in the moment, to be here now, but also to understand how to do that. So how do you do that? You do that by focusing and refocusing on the moment. So if the mind wanders off or gets distracted, we need to just remember, oh, what am I doing now? This thing, I'm here, be here now, and understand what you're doing. Also understand why you're doing it, what's your intention. But the main thing is, but all of that doesn't happen unless you have trust or faith. Unless you have confidence that says, okay, I can be mindful, right? But to be mindful, I have to make the effort. I have to be able to move through lethargy or move through doubt or something that says, well, it's not going to work, or Tyler's not going to listen to me, or the audience that doesn't want to hear what I have to say. So I have to understand that I have to have the confidence that says that, yeah, I can speak and people will hear me, and I have an idea of what it is I want to talk about. So these values of concentration is pretty simple. People know you got to be locked in. So be here now and focus on what you're doing while you're doing it in the moment. We know that the effort to do that, that's a little bit nebulous because you're not doing it, but you have to stay consistent and you have to do it in a way where you have enough confidence to make the effort. So you got to have to make the effort, but you have to be mindful to see, am I trying too hard? Am I not trying hard enough? And being able to understand that we have to regulate that. When I'm trying too much, I need to ease back. And if I'm too eased back, I have to bring more energy in. So you have this idea of concentration, of being focused, yet effort, trying to do it, but not trying too hard, not trying hard enough. If I have too much effort, then I'll be frenetic unless I balance the effort with concentration or poise of just being in a moment. And then I have this balance. And so if I have too much trust, but I don't have the insight or I don't have the information or the know-how, I can't verify it, then it's Pollyanna-ish. But if I have too much, this is mostly what we do today, is we have too much information. So we become cynical. We don't have enough trust. Oh, I can never do this. This is really hard. And, so-and-so could do it, but, I don't have the body type. I don't have the experience. And you could talk yourself out of it instead of bringing faith in and say, no, you can learn it. You have this ability to learn whatever you need to learn, but you have to be willing to pay attention and to embrace your errors and learn from them, to make mistakes and not identify with the mistakes, but realize the mistakes are opportunities for you to learn something. And it's the growth mindset. What's the lesson here? What do I need to change? What do I need to learn? And so I'm not into this, well, I'm not a good person or whatever, or I'm too fat or too slow, or I don't look right. It's really more about your effort. So your effort is getting you the results. So you can say you're this kind of person or that kind of person, but the effort and the attitude you bring to whatever you do is going to give you a certain experience. And so if you're interested in having a great experience, then you have to have a great attitude and bring an effort that is constant, consistent, but also in a relaxed ease and a joy. Have at least a little enthusiasm to really bring it there. So to summarize it, to be mindful, I need to use the right effort. I need concentration. I need the faith to even even think about it, but I also need to know what's the essentials. I need to have the information to do it. So mindfulness without knowing what am I being mindful of the time or what I'm doing. So if I'm listening, I have to be mindful of the fact that I probably need to listen more than speak, and then listen to the person unfiltered, and then respond to what is being asked in a way. But in order to do that, I have to have the faith, and I have to make the effort. I have to have the information, and I have to be mindful. But it's really balancing those things, trying, but having some stability or some poise, some steadiness of mind. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yeah. I think one of the other dichotomies you bring up in the book, I love that you talk about, is with our nervous system. You talk about the brake and the accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a concept that a lot of athletes, if they're listening, can kind of relate to that. Can you talk a little bit about the brake and the accelerator?
Yeah, so I'm really talking about, I'll get a little technical here a little bit. I'm really talking about the autonomic nervous system.
Yeah.
So it has two aspects. One is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So if we look at it as a right-handed person like I am, so the sympathetic is like the words of the song. It's the left brain. It's 1 + 1 = 2. And that is also where you have the fight, flight, and freeze is actually the reptilian brain. So you get revved up to fight or to flee or to kind of freeze or be paralyzed. And so the idea is that that's one of it. The other part of it is that's the accelerator. So you can stimulate, you can generate the energy to meet things, and we need that. We need to be able to, you're walking across the street, the car comes, you need to be able to jump out of the way so you don't get hit. But then the parasympathetic is the rest and the digest, where the fight, flight, freeze, the rest and the digest, or what I say being in growth mode, where it's the melody of the song and seeing the big picture, and there's an ease and there's a knowingness that comes out of that. But the challenge is this left brain is constantly controlling things, and unless we can be still and know, or we can direct our attention to one thing, where this stops being so active, and then the right brain has more opportunity so that we can have more of a balance kind of a thing. So we can train ourselves to be in rest and digest. Because when we're in the fight, flight, or freeze, what happens is all of the adrenaline and all of the blood goes to the big muscles to fight or flee. So let's say I just finished eating breakfast. So when I go into fight, flight, or freeze, now that food's not being digested, I get GI problems, and it affects my immune system. So my body's unable to fight off disease. Mentally, the midbrain freezes. So even though I know what to do and I have information, I don't have access to it, because it's just, everything is just in high alert. And on a cellular level, we're either in growth mode or survival mode. So I'm actually in survival mode. And so when we're performing and then we have doubt come in, or we're not confident, then we go into this where they call it choking sometimes, because we're actually not breathing, we're waiting to exhale, and we're choking off our talent, we're choking off our ability to be present and to see what needs to be seen, and then make real-time adjustments to that. So everything we learn, we practice, it can go out the window if the mind gets mostly hijacked, and we don't get there. So we want to train ourselves to be more in the rest and digest, so that we can actually have the prefrontal cortex direct that energy. So we're using effort, but the effort is with a purpose. There's an intelligence to it. There's we have an intention, and we have the understanding of this is when I make a mistake, can I in real time change my behavior or whatever it needs to be changed so that I'm getting the result I want. But unless I have this, if I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, I'm so busy reacting, there's no space between stimulus and response. And when I'm in the rest and digest, there's space. And in that space, I get the freedom and power to choose. So we actually slow things down. So instead of reacting to things, we respond to them by pausing, looking at it and understanding what's there so that we know exactly if we have an intention and we know what a right effort is, or what a skillful effort is, or what a wise decision is. Like, okay, if I'm moving forward and I get stuck, how do I get unstuck? So you have to, instead of trying to force it, we have to pause and say, okay, so what's the obstruction and how do we remove it? Or maybe we just need to move around it, or we need to step over it, but we need to be able to pause and ask, well, what is this? And what's the best way for me to navigate this roadblock?
Yeah.
Do I go around it? Do I go over it? Do I go to the left? Do I go to the right? But we have to acknowledge, oh, there's a roadblock there, and my intention is to get beyond it.
Yeah. It's an obstacle, not the end, right?
It's a struggle.
Yeah. One of the quotes that you share, I think, is by Rollo May in the book. And I think, doing the inner work and the things we talked about takes courage. I think on my journey, when I started to get into meditation, you feel a little silly, as a former athlete, and what am I doing? And then you start to see some benefits and see the tools of it. But the quote about courage, and it said, just as one's heart, by pumping blood to one's arms, legs, and brain, enables all other physical organs to function, so courage makes possible all the psychological virtues. Can you talk about how courage can help us pump up some of those other virtues?
Yes. Because if you're in a fight, flight, or freeze, you're locked up and you're not moving forward because you don't see a way forward. And so you don't have the courage, because here's the interesting thing. And this is something that Victor, Soren Kierkegaard said, that one side of the coin is freedom, the other side of the coin is uncertainty or anxiety. And so anytime, and Rollo May also, was it Rollo May? No, this might have been Eric Fromm. He said that whenever we decide to change a habit, even when we brush our teeth, or what our routine is around anything, we mobilize anxieties, and we need courage to say, yes, this is uncomfortable, this is unpleasant, yes, and I'm going to incrementally just move a little bit beyond it, get a little bit get comfortable being uncomfortable, move through the anxieties. And by moving through the anxieties, now they become, instead of being a something that we're kind of resisting, we embrace it, we move through it like walking through a door. And by moving through it, we get stronger. And it allows us to do all of those other virtues that we're interested in. Because if you don't step forward, or if you don't move in a direction, if you don't embrace what's in front of you, say yes to it, and how am I going to relate to it in that space between stimulus and response so that I achieve my goal? That is what happens. So without the heart, without the movement, without the ability to embrace the discomfort, or the unpleasant, or the uncertainty, to embrace uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, is to say yes to it and to learn from it. What is this? How do I move through it? So you need that courage. And that makes everything else possible. Without courage, nothing's going to happen. You can just sit back and be in the fight, flight, or freeze, and just be paralyzed and not be able to move forward. It's only by opening the heart and being vulnerable that we're able to learn and to move forward and realize, I assumed there's going to be a certain thing. I think it was Mark Twain who talked about all the things he was worried about that never happened.
Yeah.
So it's that. So
yeah.
it's the heart, and the heart open and breaking open and being able to say, okay, I'm going to say yes to it and see how I can relate to it in a way that I learn, that I get empowered, because it's something for me to get here.
Yeah. You said one of
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I love it. You said one of my magic words I love to hear, and it will pivot topics a little bit. You said vulnerability.
Yes.
I always believe, being vulnerable is one of the gateways to being a good leader, and being relatable. Is there a time or working with athletes or that comes to mind where you've kind of witnessed that, you don't have to name any names or people, but where vulnerability created a better connection for leaders to lead?
Yes, I can talk from my own experience when I think
Sure.
about, yeah, just the vulnerability to admit that you're wrong.
Mm.
You make a mistake and say, my bad, I made a mistake, and I apologize, and I'm going to do something about it. I'm actually going to learn from it. And that's where I think a lot of us fall down, is we don't, the vulnerability. And Brene Brown has done a lot of research on
Mhm.
vulnerability, the power of vulnerability. When we're vulnerable, and we can say that I'm human, I make mistakes, but I own them and I learn from them. That's being vulnerable, because a lot of people feel like if I'm a leader, I have to be perfect and I don't make mistakes, and I'm not, don't make mistakes. I made mistakes in the past, but not now. Instead of realizing, well, things are what they call, the military calls VUCA, VUCA. From moment to moment, things are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So we have to understand that when that happens, we say, okay, I don't know. It's humility. It's saying, I don't know, but let's see. How do we learn it? So when I went to graduate school, it was 13 years after I graduated from my got my bachelor's degree. And I went to this school called Cambridge College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And what was fascinating about the faculty there was we would go in and we would explore the unknown, like in Star Trek. Star Trek, they talked about the undiscovered country. Go to where no man has gone
Yeah.
before. And it was like, and they would say, oh, okay, they had this sense of curiosity and fascination, like, okay, so how do we do this? So they were admitting that they didn't know, but we could explore it and investigate and learn together.
Yeah.
And so that's the vulnerability, to say, I don't know, let's see, I don't know, let's see about that, or I'm interested, I know a little bit, but let's investigate, let's explore, let's seek to understand.
Yeah.
See, that's the willingness to say, okay, this thing about Columbus. Well, maybe he's not the best one to talk about it, but the Earth is flat. If somebody went beyond that, that took courage. You know,
Sure.
to go into undiscovered country. I mean,
Yeah.
we've done that with a lot of stuff, but down the inner space, to go through, for me to say, I don't know what it's like, me going to graduate school or studying psychology. I don't even know the lingo. I had to get a lexicon that helps me with the terminology, so that I could develop a different terminological screen, so I could see things through the lens of a psychologist, and that sort of thing, versus having been a financial analyst and looking at business stuff and analyzing things.
Yeah.
Change that to analyzing people, especially myself, and groups, and group dynamics and that sort of thing. So it takes a certain level of vulnerability to say, I don't know and I want to learn.
Yeah. I think it's great. Like you kind of mentioned there, I think it just opens the door to learn together.
Yes. The seek that you don't know, but not knowing is a way of knowing.
Great teams that learn together will usually succeed
Yes.
together, I find.
Yeah. What Joseph Campbell said in The Power of Method, to know, he who thinks he knows does not know, and he who does not know knows.
Mm.
And so that's the thing there, is by not knowing, you get to know, because you're open and you'll learn.
Yeah. So I got two more questions for you, George. One, if you could wake up tomorrow, we wave a magic wand, and every little athlete, pro athlete, wannabe athlete wakes up tomorrow with one of the superpowers. What superpower do you want them to wake up with tomorrow?
It's interesting. Mindfulness.
What would that do for them?
See, here's the interesting thing. When I talk about the superpowers, you can't have one without having them all. Where one is, they all are. So you need mindfulness to cultivate focus, or to be in the moment, be non-distractibility.
Yeah.
You need the faith. Be mindful that you don't have enough faith. You have to get more faith, right? So you get more faith, and then the mindfulness says, well, you have too much faith. You have to verify it. Then you need more insight, and so you need to have all of these. So to develop, it's called the Satipatthana Sutta, or the four foundations of mindfulness. And in that, to develop mindfulness, you have to have all of those. You have to have the ability of being mindful, clearly knowing beyond desires and discontent. That's concentration and diligence, the right effort. So it tells you, here's how you develop mindfulness through, diligence, non-distractibility, clearly knowing what you're being mindful of, and then the faith is not there, but it's implied. You have to have the faith to make that. So in order to be mindful, if you're mindful that you're not making the right effort, if you're mindful that you have too much, so that's the hub. So the mindfulness is the hub of everything.
It's your magic wand, George. So we can give them all 5. It's your magic wand.
Yeah. So I'm saying, but the one that you have, but it's
got to have that.
Yeah. So the one thing is, here's the interesting thing. The magic wand is really that you have a masterpiece, but you need to develop it.
Yeah.
And so the mindfulness makes all that, or this ability to sit back and observe our experience and understand, we have this ability, but these superpowers are, if one is there, if I'm concentrated, if I'm focused because I'm making the right effort. I have the trust to make the effort. I know exactly what it is that the insight, the information, the clearly knowing what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And just letting things, because you're interacting with the moment, being in the moment, but interacting in the moment and knowing how to see the moment in a way where you can flow with it. You can be with it in a way where you're able to self-regulate or to make choices and to do what you need to do. So it's I would give them the 5 superpowers, and mindfulness being the hub of that. But if you have one of the superpowers, all of the superpowers are there because they interact. It's just that one will be more in the forefront and everything else will be in the background or in the down low. That makes sense?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. One other idea and last question, I'd like to explore the idea of success. What is success when you think about it?
Yes. Well, there's a gentleman that I've been listening to even before I got into recovery. I used to read his stuff. His name is Earl Nightingale. Obviously, he's an OG, so he's dead and buried, but his words live on. He wrote a book called The Strangest Secret, and it ended up being just a little thing for salesmen, but it ended up being this little book. And in that book, The Strangest Secret, he has a definition of success. And it's the best definition of success that I like, because it's really applicable. Success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. It's a progressive realization of a worthy ideal or goal. So we have this idea that we have to be successful to be happy, and the research says we're happy, then we're successful. So making steps in the right direction is a progression, and you're being successful each moment that you are moving in the right direction, so that now you have that happiness, that joy, that fulfillment that leads you towards the goal. And so the goal is like, and I think it was Schopenhauer, one of the philosophers, talks about the idea, or somebody was talking about, that we think that the destination is the real thing, but when we get older, we realize it's the journey, not the destination.
Thank you for tuning in and all the way to the end. Appreciate that. If something this episode caught your ear, is useful or unique, I would love if you would share it, or, a thumbs up's always encouraging as well. If you want to come back and check out more videos, smash that subscribe button, ring that bell for notifications, and we'd love to have you back. Have a great day, and go elevate others.